In Las Vegas, a 48-year-old martial artist in a simple red gi was about to face the youngest heavyweight champion in history. What was billed as a glitzy exhibition turned deadly serious when Mike Tyson stormed the ring with the intention of humiliating Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris wasn't your typical action film star. For decades, he had been a six-time world karate champion, respected for the calm, precision, and discipline that had forged his legend. When Tyson mocked karate and charged with the fury that had ended countless careers, he had no idea he was walking into the trap of a lifelong strategist. Norris's subtle counters and perfectly timed strikes would trigger a seismic shift in the fight's momentum. What began as a spectacle of hype and mockery would become a test of respect and resilience. The neon-lit strip would never be the same after the night. Tyson was humbled by a spinning kick that silenced 20,000 roaring fans. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The neon lights of Las Vegas burned against the darkening desert sky, casting their electric glow across the strip. Billboards stretching 30 feet high advertised what promoters called the ultimate showdown. Heavyweight boxing champion Mike Tyson versus martial arts legend Chuck Norris. Inside the arena, 20,000 souls generated a wall of sound that seemed to physically press against the rafters. Camera flashes strobed across the darkened space like lightning in a thunderstorm. This was Vegas in its prime. Excess, spectacle, and the promise of witnessing something people would talk about for decades. Howard Cosell's distinctive voice cut through the din of the crowd, reaching millions more watching at home. Never before have we seen such a clash of combat philosophies. Boxing's most fearsome puncher against karate's most celebrated champion. Raw, devastating power against technical precision. His broadcast partner, a former boxing champion himself, chuckled. Let's be honest, Howard. Norris makes fine action films, but this is boxing. This is Tyson's world. The martial arts stuff looks great on camera, but it won't hold up against the hardest puncher in heavyweight history. Cosell nodded diplomatically. Many share that sentiment, but remember, before Hollywood, Norris was a legitimate world karate champion. Still, the odds in Vegas tell the story. Tyson is a 7-1 favorite. In the boxing champion's dressing room, the energy was electric. 22-year-old Mike Tyson, the youngest heavyweight champion in history, shadowboxed in front of a mirror. His movements were explosive, each punch cutting through the air with vicious intent. His entourage surrounded him, trainers, hangers-on, promoters, all feeding the champion's ego with every breath. "This is ridiculous," Tyson said, not breaking his rhythm as he punched. "They're paying me millions to beat up an actor." His trainer, Kevin Rooney, wrapped Tyson's hands methodically. "Don't underestimate him, Mike. Norris was a real fighter before the movies." Tyson scoffed. "Six-time karate champion? What does that even mean? Kicking boards? Fighting in pajamas?" The entourage erupted in laughter. "I knock out professional heavyweights. Real fighters. For real." The champion stopped punching, turned to his reflection, and stared at himself. His face transformed into the mask that had terrified a generation of boxers, emotionless, pitiless. The face of inevitable destruction. "I'm the baddest man on the planet, not some actor." Down the hall, in a smaller dressing room, Chuck Norris sat alone on a bench. At 48, the lines around his eyes had deepened, but his physique remained carved from stone. Unlike Tyson's room, there was no entourage here, no hype men, just quiet focus. Chuck sat motionless, eyes closed, breath measured. On a small table beside him lay a weathered black belt, frayed at the edges from decades of use. He opened his eyes, reached for the belt, and ran his fingers along its length. This wasn't the prop he wore in his films. This was his first black belt, earned through thousands of hours of discipline. A single knock at the door broke his meditation. His brother Aaron entered, carrying Chuck's red fighting gi. "How's it looking out there?" Chuck asked, his voice calm. "Crazy. Never seen anything like it," Aaron replied. "The crowd's definitely pro-Tyson. They're treating this like a circus. Like you're just another victim." Chuck nodded, untroubled. "That's fine. You've heard what they're saying? The commentators, the odds, all of it?" "I have." "And it doesn't bother you?" Chuck stood, taking the gi from his brother. "I didn't take this fight for them. I took it because everyone deserves to be reminded that true strength isn't about who hits hardest." He tied his belt with practiced precision. "It's about control." The arena dimmed, leaving only the brilliantly lit ring at its center. A spotlight sliced through the darkness, finding the tunnel entrance as AC/DC's Back in Black thundered through the sound system. The crowd rose as one, a roar building as Mike Tyson appeared. The champion moved with predatory purpose, his entourage trailing behind him like the wake of a destroyer cutting through water. Tyson bounded up the steps and through the ropes, immediately claiming the center of the ring. He paced back and forth, punching the air, that familiar scowl transforming his face. He looked untouchable, invincible, a force of nature contained in human form. The music faded, replaced by a quieter introduction. The spotlight found the opposite tunnel. Chuck Norris emerged alone, dressed in a simple red gi, black belt tied at his waist. Where Tyson had stormed the ring, Chuck walked deliberately, acknowledging the crowd with a slight bow before climbing through the ropes. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. Tyson's explosive energy against Chuck's controlled presence. The champion continued to pace, throwing occasional glances at the martial artist, his expression a mixture of amusement and disdain. "Look at him," Tyson said loudly to his corner. He brought his pajamas to a boxing match. Chuck heard the comment but gave no reaction. He simply stretched, his movements fluid and precise, his focus unbroken. The referee called both fighters to the center. Even here, the differences were apparent. Tyson bounced on his toes, barely containing his energy, while Chuck stood perfectly still, hands at his sides. "You know the rules," the referee said. "This is an exhibition match, 3-minute rounds. I want a clean fight from both of you." He looked between them. "Touch gloves." Tyson thrust his gloves forward aggressively. "Hope you got paid up front, movie star. You're about to find out what real Fighting Island." Chuck touched gloves lightly, meeting Tyson's eyes without fear or bravado. He said nothing, which seemed to irritate the champion even more. As they returned to their corners, the crowd's energy peaked. The bell was seconds away from sounding. Two warriors, two philosophies, two definitions of strength, about to collide. In the front row, celebrities and high rollers leaned forward in anticipation. Gambling fortunes rode on the outcome. Television cameras zoomed in on both fighters' faces. Tyson's a mask of controlled rage. Chuck's a study in calm focus. The bell rang, sharp and clear, and the world held its breath. The bell's echo was still reverberating when Tyson exploded from his corner. He crossed the ring in 3 bounding steps, launching a left hook that could have felled a redwood. The crowd surged to its feet as one, many already certain they were about to witness Chuck Norris's humiliation. But the martial artist wasn't there. With a subtle shift of weight and a half-step back, Chuck evaded the punch by millimeters. Tyson's momentum carried him forward, exposing his flank for just an instant. Chuck's right leg flashed out, delivering a side kick to Tyson's ribs. Not with full power, but enough to register. The champion's eyes widened in surprise. He regrouped instantly, unleashing a barrage of hooks and uppercuts, his signature combination that had dispatched opponents in seconds. Again, Chuck moved with precision, slipping punches that missed by whispers, his footwork carrying him just beyond danger. The crowd's roar stuttered, expectations suddenly uncertain. "Extraordinary," Howard Cosell commented, leaning forward in his broadcast booth. "Norris is showing remarkable defensive movement. Tyson hasn't landed cleanly yet." His partner scoffed. "He's running. Can't win a fight on your back foot. Tyson just needs to cut off the ring." As if hearing the commentary, Tyson adjusted his approach. He stopped chasing and began stalking, using the ring geometry to trap Chuck against the ropes. When the martial artist tried to circle left, Tyson was there. When he moved right, Tyson cut him off. Finally cornered, Chuck faced the incoming storm. Tyson launched a right hand with knockout intent. This time, Chuck parried rather than evaded, redirecting the force of the blow past his head. In the same motion, he delivered a sharp jab to Tyson's solar plexus. The champion grunted, not hurt, but definitely surprised. The few Norris supporters in the crowd cheered, while Tyson's fans grew restless. "Stand and fight!" someone shouted from ringside. "He is fighting," murmured an older man seated nearby, a former karate competitor who recognized the strategy unfolding. "Just not the way you expect." Midway through the round, Tyson managed to trap Chuck against the ropes. He unleashed a barrage of punches, some finding their mark on Chuck's guard. The impact drove the martial artist back, but his defensive shell held. When a small opening appeared, Chuck countered with a quick front kick that caught Tyson's shoulder, creating just enough space to slip away from the ropes. Tyson's frustration became visible. He'd expected to walk through this movie star, but instead found himself working harder than anticipated. As they circled again, he decided to add psychological warfare. "This ain't one of your movies," Tyson taunted, loud enough for the front rows to hear. "No second takes here, old man." Chuck maintained his composure, neither responding to the taunt nor changing his methodical approach. This seemed to irritate Tyson even more. The round continued with this dynamic, Tyson pressing forward with explosive power, Chuck defending with disciplined technique. When the bell rang, neither man had dominated, though Tyson had landed more punches. In Tyson's corner, his trainer worked quickly, applying an ice pack to a swelling under the champion's right eye, the result of a counter Chuck had landed in the final exchange. "What the hell was that?" Tyson demanded, breathing heavily. "He keeps running." "He's not running," Rooney corrected. "He's measuring you. Setting traps. You need to be patient. Break him down, systematically." Across the ring, Chuck sat alone on his stool. His brother offered water, which he accepted with a nod. "You okay?" Aaron asked quietly. Chuck nodded again. "He's powerful," he admitted. "But predictable. The crowd thinks you're just surviving." A hint of a smile touched Chuck's lips. "Let them." The second round began with Tyson adjusting his strategy. Instead of rushing in, he advanced more deliberately, cutting off the ring, forcing Chuck to engage rather than evade. When they clashed, Tyson landed a solid right to Chuck's ribs. The impact was audible even over the crowd's roar. Chuck absorbed it, countered with a combination of his own, a jab, followed by a roundhouse kick that caught Tyson's shoulder. The exchange set the tone for the round. Tyson landed the heavier blows, but Chuck's technical precision kept him in the fight. The martial artist began incorporating more of his karate background, using kicks to maintain distance and disrupt Tyson's rhythm. By the round's midpoint, something unexpected was happening. Tyson, known for his cardiovascular conditioning, was breathing heavily. The constant movement, the need to adjust to unfamiliar techniques, was taking a toll. In contrast, Chuck seemed to be settling into a rhythm. His movements remained efficient, his breathing controlled. Where Tyson expended energy with explosive power, Chuck conserved his, making every motion count. The dynamic wasn't lost on the commentators. "We're seeing something remarkable here," Cosell observed. "Norris is forcing Tyson to fight at a pace and in a style that's unfamiliar. The champion appears to be working much harder than anticipated." As the round progressed, Tyson landed a heavy left hook that rocked Chuck momentarily. The crowd erupted, sensing a turning point. Tyson pressed the advantage, launching the combination that had ended many fights. But Chuck weathered the storm, his defensive skills allowing him to absorb or deflect the worst of it. When he emerged from the barrage still standing, a murmur of respect rippled through the arena. The bell rang, ending the second round. On the surface, it was Tyson's round. He had landed the more damaging blows. But beneath that, a subtle shift was occurring. The narrative was changing. This wasn't a mismatch. This was a fight. In his corner, Tyson slumped on his stool, gulping water. "Something's wrong," he muttered. "I should have knocked him out by now." Rooney worked on a cut that had opened over Tyson's eye. "Nothing's wrong. He's just better than we thought. But you're wearing him down. This round, I want you to go to the body more. Break his ribs, slow his movement." Across the ring, Chuck remained composed. A bruise was forming on his left cheek, but his breathing was even, his focus unwavering. "You're frustrating him," Aaron said quietly. "I can see it." Chuck nodded. "Third round," he said simply. "Time to change the tempo." The bell rang for round 3. Neither man could know it then, but everything was about to change. The third round began with Tyson abandoning all pretense of patience. Frustration had overcome strategy. He charged forward, throwing punches with bad intentions, determined to end this unexpectedly competitive match. "Tyson is fighting angry now," Cosell observed. "A dangerous proposition for his opponents, but sometimes a tactical error for the champion himself." Chuck recognized the shift immediately. Where he had been primarily defensive, he now adjusted his approach. As Tyson launched a wild overhand right, Chuck stepped into the punch rather than away from it, slipping inside Tyson's guard. He delivered 3 rapid strikes to the champion's midsection before Tyson could react. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The crowd's collective voice caught in its throat. A moment of collective realization that the action star was actually fighting back, not just surviving. Tyson responded with a vicious left hook that caught Chuck on the shoulder. Even partially blocked, the impact was enough to make the martial artist wince. But instead of retreating, Chuck maintained inside position, delivering short, precise strikes that prevented Tyson from generating his full power. For nearly a minute, they fought in the pocket. The most dangerous place to be against Mike Tyson. Yet Chuck not only survived, he thrived, using his karate background to create angles that boxing didn't prepare for. When they separated, Tyson was bleeding from his right eye and breathing heavily. The champion spat his mouthguard into his glove and shouted across the ring, "That all you got, movie boy?" Chuck merely reset his stance, centered his breathing, and waited. The lack of response seemed to infuriate Tyson more than any trash talk could have. The champion stalked forward again. But now, his movements had lost some of their fluidity. His combinations, while still powerful, lacked their earlier crispness. Fatigue was setting in, not just physical, but mental. The fight wasn't following the script Tyson had anticipated. Midway through the round, the dynamic shifted dramatically. Tyson, overcommitting to a right cross, left himself exposed for a fraction of a second. It was all Chuck needed. He delivered a perfectly timed spinning back kick that caught Tyson flush in the solar plexus. The impact lifted the champion off his feet. The crowd gasped as Tyson stumbled backward, more from surprise than damage. Never in his professional career had he been hit like that. For the first time, uncertainty flashed across his face. "My God," Cosell exclaimed. "Norris has staggered the champion. This exhibition is becoming very real. Very quickly." The moment wasn't lost on the fighters. Chuck recognized the opening. Not just physical, but psychological. Tyson's aura of invincibility had cracked. The martial artist pressed forward, now the aggressor, landing a combination of punches and kicks that forced Tyson to cover up. The champion retreated to the ropes, his expression a mixture of confusion and growing respect. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Chuck Norris, the movie star, the pretend fighter, was backing up the baddest man on the planet. From the front row, celebrities who had been casually watching were now on their feet. This had transformed from spectacle to legitimate contest in the span of 30 seconds. Tyson gathered himself. Determination, replacing shock. He pushed off the ropes and charged, swinging with renewed fury. One punch slipped through Chuck's guard, catching him on the jaw. The impact rocked the martial artist, sending him back several steps. The crowd roared, sensing momentum shifting back. Tyson pressed the advantage, landing 2 more solid shots that had Chuck covering up. "There it is!" Tyson's trainer shouted from the corner. "Finish him!" But Chuck hadn't survived decades of full-contact karate by breaking under pressure. He weathered Tyson's assault, absorbed what he couldn't avoid, and waited for his moment. When Tyson overextended on an uppercut, Chuck countered with a side kick to the ribs that stopped the champion's advance. The exchange left both men breathing heavily, reassessing each other with newfound respect. The remaining minute of the round saw tactical exchanges rather than wild flurries. Each man aware that this had become a real fight, with real consequences. When the bell rang ending round 3, the arena buzzed with electricity. What had begun as a sideshow was now the main event. The odds, once overwhelmingly in Tyson's favor, had been rewritten by reality. In his corner, Tyson slumped on his stool, wincing as his cutman worked on his eye. "What the hell is happening?" he demanded, spitting blood into a bucket. Rooney leaned in close. "You're fighting his fight. He's got you reacting instead of acting. You need to settle down, use your jab, set up your power shots, stop headhunting." Tyson nodded, but doubt had crept in where certainty once ruled. Across the ring, he watched Chuck sitting calmly, barely breathing hard despite the intensity of the previous round. "Look at him," Tyson muttered. "Not even tired." "Doesn't matter," Rooney insisted. "No one can take your power for long. Break his body, and his head will follow." In Chuck's corner, Aaron applied ice to a swelling on his brother's cheek. "He felt that kick," Chuck said quietly. "Never been hit like that before." Aaron nodded. "You've got him thinking. That's half the battle. He'll come out desperate next round. More dangerous. You've faced desperate opponents before." Chuck nodded, centering himself again. Desperation makes them predictable. The 1-minute rest period ended too quickly for both fighters. As they rose for round 4, the energy in the arena had transformed. What began as curiosity, even mockery, had become genuine anticipation. The question was no longer whether Chuck would survive. It was whether Tyson could reassert his dominance. The bell rang. Both men moved to the center of the ring, circling each other with new respect. The fight had entered uncharted territory. Whatever happened next would be remembered long after the neon lights of Vegas faded into the desert night. The fourth round opened with a tangible shift in energy. Tyson emerged from his corner with renewed focus, his earlier frustration channeled into cold determination. His trainer's words had cut through the anger. He needed to fight smart, not just hard. The champion's body language had changed. Gone was the loose, almost dismissive posture of the earlier rounds, replaced by the coiled readiness of a predator who had recognized the genuine threat before him. His gloves were held higher, his head movement more pronounced, his footwork more deliberate. This was Tyson, at his most dangerous. Not just physically powerful, but tactically sharp. Chuck recognized the change immediately. The martial artist's eyes narrowed slightly, the only visible indication that he had registered the adjustment in his opponent's approach. He knew this moment would come, when Tyson would move beyond underestimation and anger into focused respect. This was where the true test would begin. "We're seeing the real Mike Tyson now," Cosell commented, leaning forward in his broadcast position. Not just the destroyer, but the tactician, the student of boxing history who understands the sweet science beyond just knockout power. His broadcast partner nodded in agreement. This is the Tyson that students of boxing appreciate most. The defensive genius, the master of angles. His aggression gets the headlines, but his technical brilliance is what truly separates him from other power punchers. In the front row, boxing luminaries watched with renewed attention. Sugar Ray Leonard leaned toward Thomas Hearns, seated beside him, gesturing toward Tyson's adjusted stance. Whatever technical observation he shared drew a thoughtful nod from the hitman. They recognized what casual observers might miss. The champion was implementing a more sophisticated approach. The reckless aggression had been replaced by calculated pressure. Tyson established his jab, a weapon often overlooked in his arsenal due to his devastating hooks and uppercuts. The jab came sharp and straight, not just measuring distance but forcing Chuck to constantly adjust his defense. The champion was setting traps rather than simply overwhelming with power. "Tyson's jab is underrated," the color commentator observed. "It's not just a rangefinder, it's stiff enough to hurt you, fast enough to surprise you, and accurate enough to set up his power shots." Chuck responded with characteristic adaptability. Where he had primarily relied on evasion in earlier rounds, he now employed more active defense, parrying Tyson's jab, countering with his own straight punches, establishing a rhythm that wouldn't allow the champion to dictate the pace entirely. Tyson advanced behind his jab, cutting off the ring with practiced footwork. Each step was purposeful, each position carefully chosen to limit Chuck's escape routes. When the martial artist tried to circle away, Tyson was there, forcing him to engage rather than reset. "Look at how Tyson is controlling the geography of the ring," Cosell remarked. "He's forcing Norris to either stand and trade or retreat to the ropes, removing the middle ground that allowed Chuck to control distance in previous rounds." A minute into the round, Tyson found his opening. As Chuck attempted a front kick, the champion timed his movement perfectly. Rather than backing away, he slipped to the outside of the kick and delivered a crushing left hook to the body. The impact drove the air from Chuck's lungs, the thud audible even over the crowd's roar. Chuck instinctively clinched, wrapping Tyson's arms to prevent follow-up shots while he recovered his breathing. It was a fundamental boxing tactic employed perfectly, something that surprised those who had dismissed him as merely a karate practitioner playing at boxing. The referee warned them to break, but not before Tyson whispered into Chuck's ear, "Not so fancy now, are you?" The champion's words carried no malice, just the professional gamesmanship of a fighter who believed he had found his path to victory. As they separated, Tyson immediately pressed his advantage, driving Chuck toward the ropes with a series of jabs, followed by a right cross to the body. For the first time, Chuck looked genuinely troubled. His movement had lost some of its fluidity, his counterattacks coming a fraction slower than before. The body shot had done damage, not just to his physical condition, but to the aura of untouchable composure he had maintained. In Chuck's corner, Aaron watched with concern. His brother had faced punishment before, but never from someone with Tyson's destructive power. The body shot had been perfectly placed, the kind that damaged not just flesh but resolve. "Chuck needs to create space," one commentator observed. "He can't allow Tyson to keep him in boxing range, where the champion's shorter, more compact punches have the advantage." Across the ring, Tyson's entourage was on their feet, sensing the tide turning back in their fighter's favor. The champion's trainer shouted instructions. Though they were unnecessary, Tyson could feel the momentum shift, could sense the minute changes in Chuck's movement that indicated the body shot had taken its toll. "Tyson has found his rhythm," Cosell observed. "Norris appears to be feeling the effects of that devastating body shot. For the first time tonight, he looks vulnerable." The champion pressed his advantage, cutting off the ring with practiced efficiency. His combinations came in measured bursts rather than wild flurries. Jab, jab, hook to the body. Jab, cross to the head. Each sequence designed to force Chuck into defensive reactions that would open further opportunities. Chuck adapted as best he could, using lateral movement to prevent being trapped against the ropes. But Tyson's ring generalship was showing. His footwork always positioning him to cut off escape routes, forcing the martial artist to either retreat or engage on boxing terms. Midway through the round, Tyson trapped Chuck in a neutral corner. The champion had maneuvered him there methodically, each step closing another avenue of escape, until Chuck found himself with nowhere to go but through Tyson himself. It was masterful ringcraft, the kind that had made Tyson not just a puncher, but a complete boxer. With his opponent cornered, Tyson launched the combination that had demolished countless adversaries. Jab to blind, right cross to stun, left hook to finish. It was a sequence executed with such speed and precision that boxing trainers used it as a textbook example of perfect punching mechanics. Chuck slipped the jab and cross with millimeters to spare, his defensive reactions still sharp despite the accumulated damage. But the hook caught him flush on the jaw. A perfect shot that connected with maximum impact. The sound of the punch cut through the arena's noise. The distinct crack of leather on bone that seasoned fight fans recognize as the sound of a potentially fight-ending blow. The impact snapped Chuck's head sideways, the force traveling through his entire body. For a moment, his legs betrayed him, buckling slightly under the shock. 20,000 spectators surged to their feet as one, sensing the potential conclusion to what had become an unexpectedly competitive contest. The crowd erupted, scenting blood. Some cheered in anticipation of the spectacular knockout they had come to see. Others watched in silent concern, having developed unexpected respect for the martial artist's brave showing. Tyson pounced, unleashing a barrage intended to finish the fight. His punches came in perfect combination. Hooks to the body to lower Chuck's guard. Straight rights to the head to further daze him. Uppercuts aimed to lift his chin for the final hook that would end matters. It was the moment of crisis that reveals a fighter's true character. Not when they're dominating, but when they're hurt, exhausted, and facing an opponent intent on their destruction. Many world-class fighters had crumbled under Tyson's assault in similar circumstances, their skill and courage overwhelmed by the sheer ferocity of the champion's attack. In that moment of crisis, something remarkable happened. Rather than panic or retreat, Chuck found his center. Years of martial arts training took over, the ability to remain calm in chaos, to find stillness within storm. His breathing, which had become ragged after the body shot, suddenly regularized. His eyes, momentarily glazed from the hook, cleared with focused intention. "Look at Norris," Cosell said, his voice hushed with respect. "He's hurt, certainly. But observe his composure, his center of gravity lowering slightly, his guard tightening. This is what decades of martial discipline prepares you for, not just the physical techniques, but the mental fortitude to remain composed when everything within you wants to panic." Chuck weathered Tyson's assault, absorbing some blows, deflecting others, all while maintaining his composure. His defense wasn't just physical but philosophical, the embodiment of the martial arts principle that true strength comes from centeredness rather than aggression. When a momentary opening appeared, he countered with a sharp elbow strike that caught Tyson by surprise, forcing the champion to reset his attack. The technique wasn't legal in boxing, strictly speaking, but this exhibition's modified rules allowed for it. More importantly, it demonstrated Chuck's ability to access his complete fighting arsenal even under extreme pressure. The sequence changed something in the arena. What should have been Chuck's end instead became testament to his resilience. Even those who had come expecting, perhaps hoping for, his humiliation found themselves respecting his heart. The crowd's energy transformed from bloodlust to appreciation, recognizing they were witnessing something rare in combat sports, courage that transcended technique. "Extraordinary," Cosell marveled. "Norris has weathered perhaps the most dangerous assault Tyson can deliver. And he's still standing, still fighting back with discipline and purpose." As the round progressed, Tyson continued to press his advantage, but with diminishing returns. Chuck adapted to the champion's rhythm, finding counter opportunities where none should have existed. A crisp side kick created space when Tyson got too close. A precise jab disrupted Tyson's combinations before they could fully develop. A well-timed clinch nullified the champion's power when distance couldn't be maintained. With each exchange, something subtle shifted in the dynamic between them. Tyson's expression changed from predatory certainty to professional respect. He had expected Chuck to break under pressure, to revert to desperate survival tactics like so many of his previous opponents. Instead, the martial artist was adapting, evolving, demonstrating a resilience that forced the champion to reevaluate his approach. In Tyson's corner, Rooney recognized the change. "He's still dangerous," he called out. "Don't get careless. Set everything up with the jab." The champion nodded slightly, acknowledging the instruction while maintaining focus on his opponent. There was something different in his eyes now. Not just the cold determination of a fighter intent on victory, but the respect one warrior gives another, who has earned it through fire. With a minute remaining in the round, Tyson recalibrated his attack. Rather than seeking the spectacular knockout, he began working methodically, attacking Chuck's body, mixing his punches to head and midsection, seeking to accumulate damage rather than end matters with a single blow. Chuck recognized the tactical shift and adjusted in response. He created space when possible, engaged when necessary, and continued to incorporate techniques from his martial arts background that disrupted Tyson's boxing rhythm. A front kick would keep the champion at distance just long enough to reset position. A spinning back fist would force Tyson to defend from an unfamiliar angle, breaking his combination flow. The crowd, which had risen in anticipation of a knockout, gradually settled back into their seats, now invested in the technical chess match unfolding before them. What had begun as spectacle had evolved into something more substantive. A legitimate contest between two elite fighters representing different combat philosophies. "What we're witnessing," Cosell told viewers, transcends the individuals involved. This has become a fascinating dialogue between two approaches to combat. Tyson's overwhelming pressure against Norris's disciplined adaptability. Regardless of the outcome, both men have validated their respective traditions tonight. In the final minute of the round, Tyson connected with another powerful right hand that rocked Chuck. The punch landed with enough impact to momentarily disrupt the martial artist's equilibrium, creating an opening for the follow-up combination that had finished so many of the champion's previous opponents. But instead of following up immediately, Tyson hesitated for just a fraction of a second. The unconscious respect one warrior gives another who has earned it through shared adversity. That momentary hesitation, perhaps imperceptible to casual observers, spoke volumes about how the champion's perception had evolved over the course of the fight. That hesitation allowed Chuck to recover, to reset his defense. When Tyson did launch his follow-up attack, the martial artist was prepared, slipping the worst of it and countering with a straight right that landed clean on the champion's jaw. The punch didn't hurt Tyson, but it served notice that Chuck remained dangerous despite the damage he had absorbed. The round ended with both men exchanging in the center of the ring, neither giving ground, both demonstrating the heart that defines true fighters beyond their technical skills. When the bell rang, Tyson returned to his corner, breathing heavily but still confident. There was none of the frustration that had marked earlier rounds, only the focused determination of a champion who recognized he was in a real fight against a worthy opponent. "You're breaking him down," Rooney told Tyson, working on the cut above his eye that had reopened during the exchanges. "He can't take many more of those body shots." Tyson nodded, but his expression had changed. The dismissive arrogance was gone, replaced by focused respect. "He's tough," he admitted, taking a deep breath to regulate his oxygen intake. "Tougher than I thought." "But you've got him," Rooney insisted, applying an ice pack to reduce swelling. "I can see it in his movement. He's slowing down. Those body shots are taking their toll." The champion considered this assessment, eyes fixed on his opponent across the ring. "Maybe," he conceded. "But he's still dangerous, still composed." This acknowledgement represented a profound shift from the Tyson who had entered the ring, expecting an easy night's work against a movie fighter. The champion had encountered something unexpected. Not just technical skill, but the kind of inner fortitude that transcends physical attributes. Across the ring, Aaron pressed an ice pack against the side of Chuck's face. The martial artist's composure remained intact, but the physical toll was evident in the swelling around his left eye, the redness along his ribs where Tyson's body shots had landed. "That was a big round for Tyson," Aaron said quietly, working to reduce the swelling before the next round began. Chuck nodded, wincing slightly as he drew a deep breath. He adjusted, fought smarter. He took a sip of water, gathering himself. "But he's getting predictable again, falling into patterns. You see something? Every third combination, he drops his right when he throws the hook. Just for a moment." Aaron raised an eyebrow, genuinely impressed, despite having witnessed his brother's observational skills throughout his career. "You're looking for counters while he's hitting you with those bombs?" The faintest smile touched Chuck's lips. "That's the difference between us. He's fighting to prove something. I'm fighting to demonstrate something." This quiet exchange captured the essence of what had transformed this exhibition into something meaningful. For Tyson, despite his tactical brilliance and physical gifts, fighting remained fundamentally about dominance, about imposing his will through superior power and skill. For Chuck, combat was about demonstration, about embodying principles that transcended the fight itself. The 1-minute rest period ended too quickly for both men. As they rose for the 5th round, the dynamic had shifted again. Tyson had reasserted his power, but Chuck had proven his resilience. What had begun as spectacle had transcended into something authentic, a genuine test between two very different philosophies of combat. The bell rang. Both men moved to center ring with new purpose. The champion believing he was on the path to inevitable victory. The martial artist seeing something his opponent couldn't yet recognize. The fight's defining moment was approaching, though neither man could have predicted how it would unfold. The fifth round began with Tyson stalking forward, confidence restored by his success in the previous round. The champion had tasted his own vulnerability and responded by doubling down on what had made him great: relentless pressure and devastating power. The arena lights caught the sheen of sweat on his shoulders as he moved, muscles coiled with lethal intent. His eyes had regained their predatory focus. The temporary doubt erased by the knowledge that he had hurt Chuck repeatedly in the fourth round. With each step forward, Tyson's presence seemed to expand, filling the ring with the aura that had intimidated so many previous opponents. Chuck circled cautiously, his movement still fluid but more economical. The accumulated damage was evident in his slightly labored breathing, the swelling around his left eye, yet his focus remained absolute, his discipline unbroken. Where Tyson projected menace, Chuck emanated calm, a counterpoint to the champion's aggression that made their contrast all the more striking. Tyson appears to have seized control of this exhibition, Cosell observed. Though I hesitate to call it an exhibition anymore, this has become a legitimate contest between two proud warriors. His broadcast partner nodded in agreement. What's remarkable is how Norris continues to maintain his composure, despite absorbing punishment that would have broken lesser fighters. That mental discipline is something special, the kind you can't teach. In the front row, the celebrities who had come expecting mere entertainment remained riveted by the unexpected drama unfolding before them. Sylvester Stallone leaned forward, elbows on knees, studying both fighters with the eye of someone who had spent years researching boxing for his films. Beside him, Muhammad Ali watched in silent appreciation, occasionally nodding at particularly skillful exchanges. The champion pressed forward behind his jab, setting up the combinations that had re-established his dominance. His footwork was textbook perfect, cutting off the ring with practiced efficiency, forcing Chuck to engage on his terms. The martial artist defended intelligently, but Tyson's youth and power were beginning to tell. A solid right to the body forced Chuck to retreat a step, the impact visibly registering in his expression. A follow-up left hook grazed his temple, not landing flush but carrying enough force to momentarily disrupt his balance. The crowd sensed the fight's trajectory, the seemingly inevitable conclusion. Tyson was finding his target with greater frequency, while Chuck's counters, though technically perfect, lacked the impact to keep the champion at bay. Tyson's bodywork is brilliant, the color commentator noted. He's systematically breaking down Norris's mobility, taking away the fluid movement that allowed Chuck to control distance in the earlier rounds. In Chuck's corner, Aaron watched with growing concern. His brother's composure remained intact, but the physical toll was mounting. Tyson's body shots had done cumulative damage, restricting Chuck's breathing and compromising his ability to generate power in his kicks. Across the ring, Tyson's entourage sensed victory approaching, their calls becoming more animated as they urged the champion to finish what he had started. "Stay patient, Mike," Rooney shouted from the corner. "Break him down. Don't rush it." The champion acknowledged the instruction with a slight nod, never taking his eyes off Chuck. He had made that mistake in earlier rounds, allowing emotion to override strategy. Now he was fighting with cold calculation, each punch part of a larger plan to systematically dismantle his opponent's defenses. Midway through the round, Tyson connected with a thunderous uppercut that snapped Chuck's head back. The punch slipped through a gap in the martial artist's guard, landing with the kind of impact that had separated countless opponents from consciousness. The crowd surged to its feet. Phones and cameras flashing to capture what many believed would be the beginning of the end. "Tremendous uppercut from Tyson," Cosell exclaimed. "The kind that has ended so many fights before. Norris is hurt." Chuck stumbled backward, momentarily dazed. His legs, which had carried him through 4 rounds with fluid grace, suddenly seemed uncooperative. His back touched the ropes as he fought to clear his head, to re-establish the centered balance that had been his foundation throughout the fight. The crowd's roar intensified, sensing the dramatic conclusion they had expected from the beginning. This was the Tyson they had paid to see. The destroyer closing in for the kill. The predator moving in on wounded prey. Some fans were already on their feet, anticipating the spectacular knockout that would validate their expectations. Tyson pursued with practiced precision, closing the distance without rushing, cutting off any potential escape routes. There was no wild flurry, no reckless charge. Just the methodical advance of a fighter who knew exactly how to finish a hurt opponent. He launched the combination that had separated countless opponents from consciousness. Right to the body, left hook to the head, right uppercut through the middle. The right landed to Chuck's ribs, driving what little remaining air from his lungs. The martial artist winced visibly, his guard momentarily dropping in response to the body shot. The left hook started its arc toward his jaw. The punch that had ended so many of Tyson's previous fights, delivered with textbook form honed through thousands of repetitions. Then, it happened. In that microsecond between heartbeats, Chuck saw it. The pattern he'd identified, the momentary drop of Tyson's right hand as he committed to the hook. To the untrained eye, it was imperceptible. A fraction of an inch. A split-second vulnerability. But to someone who had spent decades studying the science of combat, it might as well have been a flashing neon sign. Time seemed to slow, the noise of the crowd fading to a distant roar. Chuck's conscious mind surrendered to muscle memory, to the instincts forged through tens of thousands of hours of practice. This was no longer about thought, but about pure reaction. The body knowing what to do before the mind could process it. Chuck slipped the hook by millimeters, feeling the wind of it brush past his cheek. The punch that should have ended the fight found only empty air, throwing Tyson momentarily off balance as the expected resistance failed to materialize. In the same fluid motion, Chuck pivoted on his back foot and delivered a spinning back kick with perfect technique. The culmination of thousands of hours of practice. Decades of discipline. His heel connected with Tyson's jaw with a sound that cut through the arena's roar. The unmistakable impact of bone meeting bone, amplified by the perfect transfer of kinetic energy. The kick connected at precisely the point where the jaw meets the ear, the most vulnerable target on an otherwise fortified skull. The impact lifted the champion off his feet. Mike Tyson, the most feared puncher of his generation, the undefeated heavyweight champion of the world, crashed to the canvas like a redwood felled by lightning. His body, so full of destructive purpose just moments before, suddenly limp and unresponsive as neural pathways misfired from the concussive shock. The arena froze in collective disbelief. 20,000 voices held in 20,000 throats. Cameras flashed in the sudden silence, capturing the impossible image. Tyson down. Chuck standing over him. Perfect balance maintained after the kick that changed everything. For 2 heartbeats, no one moved. No one breathed. Reality itself seemed to require a moment to adjust to what had just occurred. To process the visual of the invincible champion lying motionless on the canvas. Then chaos erupted. Half the crowd surged to their feet in shock, the other half in celebration. Commentators shouted over each other, attempting to process what they'd just witnessed. Tyson's entourage pressed against the ring apron, expressions locked in disbelief. Somewhere in the arena, a woman screamed. Not in fear, but in the primal response to witnessing the seemingly impossible. "My God!" Cosell's voice cracked with emotion. "Norris has dropped Tyson with a spinning kick." The champion is down. In all my years, I've never seen anything like this. His broadcast partner, a former boxing champion himself, could only shake his head in stunned silence. Professional vocabulary momentarily inadequate to describe what they had just witnessed. In the ring, the referee began his count, though it was unnecessary. Tyson's eyes had glazed over the moment Chuck's heel connected. The champion lay flat on his back, blinking up at the arena lights. His body not yet receiving the commands his scrambled brain was attempting to send. Chuck retreated to a neutral corner, his expression unchanged. No celebration, no raised arms. Just the same focused composure he'd maintained throughout. The only acknowledgement of what he'd accomplished was a slow, centered breath. The martial artists returned to the present moment after the perfect execution of technique. "Look at Norris," Cosell marveled, finding his professional voice again. No celebration. No playing to the crowd. The same disciplined presence he brought into this arena. That, ladies and gentlemen, speaks volumes about the man's character. In the front row, Muhammad Ali slowly rose to his feet, hands gently clapping in appreciation of what he had just witnessed. The greatest understood, perhaps better than anyone in the arena, the significance of the moment. Not just as a spectacular knockdown, but as a validation of an entire approach to combat that many had dismissed as impractical against elite boxers. The referee reached the count of 5, and Tyson showed his first signs of recovery, his gloves moving to his face as consciousness fully returned. By the count of 8, the champion had managed to roll onto his side, instinct and pride driving him to fight the fog still clouding his mind. He pushed to all fours, then to one knee, using the ropes to pull himself upright at the count of 9. Tyson stood, but his legs betrayed him, wobbling precariously. The referee looked into his eyes, asked him a question, then waved his arms. The fight would continue, a testament to Tyson's legendary heart rather than the referee's judgment. The crowd's reaction split the arena, half cheering Tyson's courage, half in disbelief that the referee allowed it to go on. In the champion's corner, Rooney shouted frantically for the towel, recognizing what professional pride prevented Tyson from acknowledging that he was in no condition to continue. "The referee is allowing this to continue," Cosell said, unable to keep the disbelief from his voice. "I question that decision." Tyson showed tremendous heart getting to his feet, but he's clearly compromised. Chuck, meanwhile, had reset his stance. Ready to resume, but showing no eagerness to capitalize on his opponent's vulnerability. There was no predatory advance, no rush to finish what he had started. Instead, he waited in the center of the ring, allowing Tyson the dignity of regathering himself. When action restarted, Tyson charged forward on instinct, launching wild punches that missed by feet rather than inches. His equilibrium was shot, his legendary defense nowhere to be found. The precision that had defined his earlier work was gone, replaced by the desperate swings of a fighter operating on muscle memory and pride rather than conscious control. Chuck evaded easily, slipping Tyson's wild punches with minimal movement. But notably, he didn't press his advantage with full force. When openings appeared, and they appeared constantly now, he countered selectively, landing clean strikes that emphasized his control without unnecessarily punishing the compromised champion. The restraint wasn't lost on the crowd. A murmur of respect rippled through the arena, even among Tyson's most vocal supporters. Chuck could have finished the fight definitively, could have humiliated the man who had mocked him, but chose discipline over domination. In that choice, he demonstrated something profound about his character and his philosophy. That true mastery isn't about destroying an opponent, but about demonstrating principle. Remarkable restraint from Norris, Cosell observed. He could end this at any moment, but he's choosing control over devastation. This speaks to the core philosophy of traditional martial arts, that power without restraint is merely violence, while power with control is mastery. As the round neared its end, Tyson began to recover some of his faculties. The fog of the knockdown gradually lifted, allowing him to regain a measure of his defensive awareness. His punches regained some accuracy, his footwork some stability. The champion's legendary heart was on full display, refusing to quit, despite having every justification to do so. In this gradual recovery, Tyson revealed something about himself that transcended his fearsome reputation. Beneath the destroyer image lay a true fighter's spirit, the willingness to continue against overwhelming odds, to face adversity with courage rather than surrender. The crowd recognized this evolution, their energy shifting from bloodlust to genuine appreciation. They were no longer witnessing a spectacle, but a human drama. Two warriors, revealing their character through how they handled both advantage and adversity. In the final exchange before the bell, Tyson launched a desperate right hand. There was still power in the punch, still danger for anyone who might receive it flush. But Chuck slipped it easily and countered with a straight right of his own that landed clean on Tyson's jaw. The two men locked eyes in that moment, a wordless communication passing between them. Whatever happened next, both knew which philosophy had proven superior tonight. It wasn't about who was the better man, but about which approach had demonstrated greater truth when tested under pressure. The bell rang, ending the fifth round. Tyson stumbled back to his corner, legs still unsteady. His entourage swarmed him, Rooney working frantically to minimize the damage and clear the champion's head. "Stop the fight," one of the commissioned doctors urged, examining Tyson's pupils with a penlight. "He's taken enough punishment." "No way," Tyson slurred, pushing the doctor's hands away. "I'm finishing this." "Mike, be smart," Rooney pleaded, ice pack pressed against the champion's swelling jaw. "You've got nothing to prove here. This is an exhibition." Tyson grabbed his trainer's wrist, his eyes suddenly clear with purpose. "Not anymore, it isn't. It's about respect now." In those words, the champion revealed how profoundly the experience had transformed him. What began as a payday, a lark, perhaps even an opportunity to humiliate a movie fighter, had become a lesson in humility and respect. Tyson, for perhaps the first time in his career, had encountered someone who had not only stood up to his power, but had overcome it with something more subtle, yet ultimately more effective: disciplined precision. Across the ring, Chuck sat calmly on his stool. For the first time all night, a hint of fatigue showed in the slight slump of his shoulders. The perfect kick had taken its toll as well. The torque required stressing muscles already taxed by nearly 15 minutes of intense combat. Aaron pressed the ice pack against the swelling on Chuck's cheek, working to reduce the damage before the final round. "You dropped Mike Tyson," he said, voice tinged with disbelief, despite having witnessed it with his own eyes. Chuck nodded slightly. "He telegraphed it. Should the ref have stopped it?" Chuck considered the question, watching Tyson's corner working feverishly to prepare their fighter for one more round. The champion was arguing with his cornermen, gesturing emphatically despite his obvious impairment. It was the behavior of a man whose pride demanded he finish what he had started, regardless of the physical cost. "No," Chuck said finally. "He deserves the chance to finish with dignity." This simple statement encapsulated everything about Chuck's approach, not just to fighting, but to life. Victory wasn't about domination or humiliation. It was about demonstrating truth while honoring your opponent's humanity. In choosing to allow Tyson the opportunity to finish the fight on his feet, Chuck revealed more about his character than any kick or punch could express. The 1-minute rest period ended. Both men rose from their stools for the final round, Tyson still slightly unsteady but determined. Chuck measured and focused. The crowd rose with them, understanding they were witnessing something historic, something that transcended sport or spectacle. The bell rang for round 6. Whatever happened in the next 3 minutes would echo far beyond this night in Vegas, beyond the careers of both men. It would become a testament to what combat sports, at their purest, are meant to demonstrate about the human spirit. The final round began with Tyson advancing slowly, his earlier frenzy replaced by caution. The knockout had changed something fundamental in the champion's approach. The arrogance was gone, replaced by hard-earned respect. The transformation was visible in every aspect of his bearing. The swagger that had defined his ring entrance had given way to a more measured presence. His eyes, once burning with predatory intent, now held a different quality, the focused awareness of a fighter who had faced his own vulnerability and emerged humbled but not broken. Chuck met him in the center of the ring, his own movements slightly more measured than before. Both men were feeling the accumulated toll of 5 intense rounds. Neither was the same fighter who had entered the ring, physically or psychologically. The arena lights captured the contrast between them in stark relief. Tyson's face showed the marks of battle, swelling along his jaw where Chuck's kick had connected, redness around his right eye from earlier exchanges. Chuck bore his own evidence of the contest, a cut above his left eye, bruising along his ribs where Tyson's hooks had found their target. They circled each other warily, exchanging probing jabs that served more to maintain distance than to damage. The crowd, which had been a constant roar throughout, grew quieter, sensing the gravity of the moment. This wasn't just the conclusion of a fight. It was the resolution of a clash between philosophies. "We're witnessing something remarkable," Cosell observed, his voice hushed with respect. "This began as spectacle, but has transformed into something profound. A genuine test between two approaches, to combat, to discipline, to the very nature of strength itself." In the front row, boxing royalty watched with rapt attention. Sugar Ray Leonard leaned forward, hands clasped, studying the technical adjustments both men had made throughout the contest. Muhammad Ali, still standing after the 5th-round knockdown, remained on his feet, silent witness to a moment that echoed his own transcendent battles. Midway through the first minute, Tyson launched a measured combination: jab, straight right, left hook. Each punch was thrown with technical precision rather than wild power. The sequence demonstrated what made the champion great beyond his devastating knockouts, the fundamental boxing skill that casual observers often overlooked. Chuck defended well, slipping the jab, blocking the right, and countering the hook with a sharp side kick that created space. The kick wasn't thrown with knockout intent but as a tactical tool, maintaining the distance that favored his longer-range techniques. The exchange set the tone for the round. Gone was Tyson's overwhelming aggression, replaced by tactical boxing. Gone was Chuck's pure defensive approach, replaced by measured counter-striking. They had found a balance: competition without destruction, intensity without hatred. "Notice how both men have adapted," the color commentator observed. "Tyson is no longer loading up on every punch, looking for the spectacular knockout. Norris isn't just evading but engaging on his own terms. They've reached a level of mutual respect that's transforming this from a contest into a conversation." In Tyson's corner, Rooney watched with a mixture of concern and pride. The champion was still compromised from the knockdown, but fighting with intelligence and heart. Despite his earlier pleas to stop the fight, he now recognized that Tyson needed this final round. Not for victory in the conventional sense, but for something more profound. This was about completing a journey, about finishing with dignity what had begun with arrogance. Across the ring, Aaron nodded slightly to himself, seeing his brother demonstrate what he had always preached, that true martial arts was about control, not dominance. Chuck moved with the same disciplined precision that had characterized his approach from the beginning, but now with an added dimension, a respect for his opponent that translated into technique rather than exploitation. "There's something almost beautiful about this final round," Cosell mused. Two masters of their craft, finding common ground in the language of combat, neither seeking to destroy the other, but both demonstrating the highest expression of their art. As the round progressed, the quality of exchanges elevated. Tyson landed a clean right cross that momentarily stopped Chuck's forward momentum. The martial artist acknowledged the punch with a slight nod. Not in surrender, but in recognition of his opponent's skill. Chuck countered with a spinning back fist that caught Tyson on the shoulder, drawing a respectful tap of gloves from the champion. The gesture wasn't choreographed or forced, but a spontaneous acknowledgement between warriors who had moved beyond the need to dominate into a shared exploration of their craft. The crowd responded to this shift, their energy changing from bloodlust to appreciation. The fans who had come expecting destruction now found themselves witnessing mastery. Two fighters at the peak of their respective disciplines, finding a common language in the ring. From the broadcast position, Cosell captured the transformation that had occurred, not just in the fighters, but in the audience itself. "What we're seeing is the education of 20,000 people," he observed. "They came for spectacle, but are leaving with something far more valuable. An understanding that true combat, at its highest level, isn't about destruction but demonstration." Midway through the round, a particularly skillful exchange drew appreciative murmurs from the crowd. Tyson launched a textbook three-punch combination that momentarily trapped Chuck against the ropes. The champion followed with an uppercut that narrowly missed its target as Chuck slipped to the side, countering with a perfectly timed knee that stopped just short of full contact with Tyson's midsection. The sequence demonstrated something profound about both men. Tyson's technical brilliance beyond mere power, Chuck's defensive genius beyond simple evasion. Neither was simply a caricature of their fighting style, both were complete martial artists in their own traditions. "Look at the respect they're showing each other now," the color commentator noted. Tyson could have followed up that combination with his usual killer instinct. Norris could have driven that knee home when he found the opening. But they're choosing control over destruction. Demonstration over domination. 2 minutes into the final round, Tyson launched his signature combination, the one that had felled so many opponents. But this time, it wasn't thrown with blind rage or dismissive arrogance. Each punch was measured, technical, a question asked rather than a statement imposed. Chuck answered in kind, his defense crisp but not evasive, his counters precise but not punishing. They had transcended the need to dominate each other, instead demonstrating the highest level of their crafts. "I'm not sure the judges could score this round," Cosell mused. "It's less a contest now than a conversation, a dialogue between two distinct martial philosophies." In the front row, boxing purists who had come expecting Tyson's triumph found themselves appreciating Chuck's technical precision. Martial arts enthusiasts who had feared their representative would be overwhelmed recognized Tyson's boxing brilliance with newfound respect. The crowd's energy continued its transformation. The bloodthirsty roars of earlier rounds replaced by appreciative murmurs and occasional bursts of applause for particularly skillful exchanges. They were no longer divided into tribal camps, but united in appreciation of what they were witnessing. Combat, elevated to art. As the final minute approached, both men seemed to acknowledge that something more meaningful than a traditional conclusion was required. By unspoken agreement, They met in the center of the ring for one final, definitive exchange. Tyson threw a perfect right cross. Not with knockout intent, but with flawless technique. The punch traveled the shortest possible distance, his weight shifting perfectly, his balance maintained throughout. It was boxing in its purest form, the culmination of centuries of refinement. Chuck slipped it by millimeters and countered with a spinning back kick that stopped just short of full contact with Tyson's ribs. The technique demonstrated everything that defined his approach: balance, timing, precision, and control. It wasn't pulled out of consideration for Tyson's earlier knockdown, but calibrated exactly to demonstrate rather than damage. The champion nodded in acknowledgement, then launched a devastating uppercut that Chuck evaded with a subtle head movement before delivering a picture-perfect front kick that touched Tyson's chest without driving through it. The sequence continued for several exchanges, each man demonstrating the pinnacle of their art without seeking to harm the other. It wasn't choreographed, but it had the beauty of a dance. Two masters communicating through movement, what words could never adequately express. What we're seeing transcends sport, Cosell said, his voice carrying the weight of someone witnessing history. This is the physical embodiment of respect. Two men, who entered as adversaries, now engaged in something approaching collaboration. The crowd fell silent, 20,000 people holding their breath as they witnessed something transcendent. This wasn't about winning anymore. It was about truth. The truth that strength comes in many forms, that discipline manifests in different ways, that respect is earned, not demanded. In that silence, the sound of each technique carried clearly. The whisper of Tyson's gloves cutting through air, the subtle snap of Chuck's gi as he pivoted into kicks, the rhythm of their breathing, the precise placement of their feet on the canvas. Everything became part of a composition that transcended the violent origins of their craft. With 30 seconds remaining, Tyson launched one final combination: jab, cross, hook. The jab missed, the cross was blocked, but the hook connected solidly with Chuck's jaw. The impact rocked the martial artist, sending him back a step. For a heartbeat, the old Tyson resurfaced, the predator sensing wounded prey. The champion surged forward, instinct overriding intention. But before he could follow up, he caught himself, remembered what this moment had become. Instead of pressing the advantage, Tyson stepped back, allowing Chuck to recover. The martial artist straightened, touched his jaw, and gave a slight nod of acknowledgement. Then, in a gesture that would be replayed for decades, he extended his hand. Not for a glove touch, but palm open, the traditional karate sign of respect. Tyson, without hesitation, removed his glove and clasped Chuck's hand. The crowd erupted, not in bloodlust but in appreciation, understanding they had witnessed something rare and precious. The final seconds ticked away, with the two warriors standing in the center of the ring, hands still clasped. The contrast between them, now a complement rather than a conflict. When the final bell rang, neither man raised his arms in victory. There was no need. Both had proven what they came to prove, demonstrated what they sought to show. The official result would be recorded as an exhibition with no winner declared, but everyone present knew that something had been decided here. Not about which man was better, but about the nature of strength itself. As the ring announcer called both men to center ring, the crowd's chant spontaneously unified, no longer divided between Tyson and Norris supporters, but calling both names in alternation, honoring what each had brought to this unexpected clash of worlds. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer began. After 6 rounds of exhibition boxing. He paused, seeming to recognize the inadequacy of the standard phrasing. After 6 rounds of extraordinary combat, by mutual respect and agreement, this contest is declared a draw. The crowd's response was thunderous approval. In any other circumstance, a draw would have been disappointing. Tonight, it was the only result that honored what had transpired. Tyson stepped forward, taking the microphone. The arena hushed, anticipating perhaps an explanation, a justification, even a challenge for a rematch. Instead, the champion looked at Chuck for a long moment, then turned to address the crowd. "I came here tonight thinking I knew what fighting was," Tyson said, his voice carrying the raw honesty that had always been his hallmark. "Thought I knew what being strong meant." He glanced at Chuck. "I learned something tonight. We all did." The simplicity of his statement carried more weight than any elaborate speech could have. This was Mike Tyson, the baddest man on the planet, acknowledging that his understanding of strength had been incomplete. The crowd absorbed his words in respectful silence, recognizing the courage it took for a champion to publicly embrace such a transformation. He handed the microphone to Chuck, who accepted it with the same calm dignity he had shown throughout the night. "Mike Tyson is a great champion," Chuck said simply. "It was an honor to share the ring with him." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "True strength isn't about dominating others. It's about mastering yourself." In the front row, Muhammad Ali nodded slowly, recognizing in Chuck's words an echo of his own philosophy. The greatest had long understood what many fighters never grasp, that the external battle is merely a reflection of the internal one. As both men left the ring side by side, the contrast that had defined the night remained. Tyson's raw power alongside Chuck's disciplined precision, but now they complemented rather than opposed each other, two expressions of the same fundamental truth. That authentic strength comes from within, tempered by respect, honed by discipline. The cameras followed them down the aisle, capturing an image that would become iconic: two warriors from different worlds, walking together in mutual respect. The commentary team struggled to find words adequate to the moment, eventually settling into appreciative silence. In the locker room, away from cameras and crowds, Tyson sat alone on a bench, still processing what had transpired. A knock at the door preceded Chuck's entrance. The martial artist had changed back into street clothes, the swelling on his face already being addressed by ice. Tyson said without preamble, "Thought this was just about money and hype." Chuck shook his head. "It was never about proving I was better than you." "Then what was it about?" "Demonstrating that there are different kinds of strength, different paths to the same truth." Tyson considered this, absently touching the bruise forming along his jaw where Chuck's kick had landed. "You could have finished me in that 5th round," he said. "After the knockdown." "Why didn't you?" "Because humiliating you wouldn't have proven my point," Chuck replied. "It would have contradicted it." The champion nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "I've been fighting to destroy, to dominate." "And you've succeeded," Chuck acknowledged. "But there's another way to fight, another reason. To demonstrate rather than dominate," Tyson said, echoing Chuck's earlier words to his brother. "Exactly." In this quiet exchange, far from the spectacle of the arena, the true meaning of the night crystallized. What had begun as a publicity stunt, a curiosity, had become a moment of genuine transformation for both men. Tyson had encountered a different kind of strength than he had previously recognized. Chuck had validated not just his personal approach but the philosophy that underpinned traditional martial arts. Tyson stood, extending his hand once more. "I won't forget tonight." Chuck clasped it firmly. "Neither will I." As they parted ways, Tyson to the waiting press conference, Chuck to a quieter exit, both men carried something they hadn't brought into the arena. The champion had gained perspective that would ultimately help him navigate the turbulent years ahead. The martial artist had validated not just his personal philosophy, but the tradition he represented. Outside, the neon lights of Vegas continued their electric dance against the desert night, unaffected by the drama that had unfolded within the arena. Promoters were already calculating the financial success of the event. Television executives reviewing the ratings, journalists drafting headlines that would attempt to capture what had transpired. But inside, something had changed that transcended the business of boxing and the spectacle of celebrity. Two warriors from different worlds had found common ground in the most unlikely of places, not in victory or defeat, but in mutual respect and shared understanding. The next morning's sports pages would carry photos of the dramatic knockdown, accompanied by headlines proclaiming the upset victory that wasn't officially declared. Television sports shows would replay the spinning kick in endless loops, commentators debating its technical execution and historic significance. But those who had been present knew they had witnessed something that couldn't be fully captured in highlights or headlines. They had seen the transformation of competition into communion, of contrast into complement, of conflict into connection. The story of that night would be told and retold, growing with each telling. Some would claim Tyson had been robbed, others that Chuck had dominated. The truth, as always, was more nuanced. What happened in that ring wasn't about who was better, but about what each man represented and what they discovered together. In the years that followed, whenever the debate arose about the nature of true strength, those who had witnessed that night in Vegas would smile knowingly. They had seen the answer played out in real time. That power without discipline is chaos. That technique without heart is empty. And that true mastery begins not with dominating others, but with controlling oneself. In a sport often defined by animosity and ego, Tyson and Norris had demonstrated something rare and precious. That the greatest victory comes not from defeating an opponent, but from transcending the need to prove your superiority in the first place. That is the lesson that echoed long after the lights dimmed and the crowd dispersed. Not that one philosophy triumphed over another, but that both, at their purest, led to the same essential truth: that respect cannot be demanded, only earned, and that true strength needs no validation beyond its own quiet certainty. Up next, we have two more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.